Ladies and gentlemen, it's not only Stephen Breyer who sides with President Trump on opposition to court packing, which is the worst idea and the most illogical and irrational policy objective or possible goal of Democrats. It makes no sense at all because if let's say Biden and the Democrats in the Senate pack the Supreme Court and add 3 or 4 extra judges, okay? So they now have either 2 or 3. No, they would need, 3 extra judges. So it's technically 6-3, with Roberts usually siding with Democrats or oftentimes. So it's really 5-4, but let's say Democrats said, well, we're going to add 3 more judges, so it'll be 6-6. Then you would still face the problem of a Republican, or let's see, how would they do it? I guess they would add, so it would be 6-6, but then you would need an odd number, so they would add four more judges, so you'd have a 7-6 Supreme Court, so you'd have 13 judges essentially. No, sorry. You would have 9 judges now, so you'd add 4 more. That's right. So 13. So whatever. The whole thing makes no sense at all. It basically is just Democrats doing the usual. They lost miserably in 2016 because they cheated their own candidate. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign. People didn't fall in line. They lost like I said they would in the Hill, the Huffington Post, and Salon. Nobody listened. Whenever you give Democrats the truth, they want to go after the messenger, write hit pieces, then the public relations machine goes after whomever is explaining the truth to them. So now it's Stephen Breyer. They want Stephen Breyer replaced. On a microscopic level, they wrote hit pieces on me simply because I was right. I told them, I said, Clinton's going to lose, and you will lose a generation of Supreme Court justices because you cheated your own candidate. You railroaded Bernie Sanders. The DNC emails forced Debbie Wasserman Schultz to resign. People did not fall in line like you. People who have critical thinking skills and have a spine and have some principle aren't going to just fall in line when they know that their preferred candidate was cheated. It wasn't fair and neutral. They lied to voters, and they got exactly what was coming to them. It's their fault. They blame the Bernie or bust people. Like, I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I used to be the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. Bernie Sanders is essentially a tool of the Democratic Party. At least President Trump or the Republicans refunded money when donations were they were recurring donations. That's a lot more noble, even though that's a problem, right? It's a lot more noble than taking $200 million during a primary that was obviously not fair and neutral, where the DNC chairwoman has to resign and then quickly work for the Clinton campaign. Then you have, we can go into it. How much of that money was used to purchase the Steele dossier? Which eventually, it's funny because Bernie Sanders raised money for the Democratic Party to then purchase a document to blame Russia for informing the world in the DNC emails that he was actually railroaded by his own political party. So it's like this circle of Democratic Party corruption. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg has sided with Stephen Breyer and Trump and McConnell and Republicans on this issue. She had sided with Republicans on this issue. Hit subscribe right now to this channel. One reason this channel is important to my voice is that, you know what? I look back maybe 1-2 years ago. Justice Ginsburg, this is an article, God bless her, when she was alive, she says, I am very much alive. July 24, 2019, NPR. Okay? 9 seems to be a good number. It's been that way for a long time, she said, adding, I think it was a bad idea when President Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court. Okay? Then she said several Democratic candidates have indicated an openness, if they were to win the presidency, to adding the number of justices on the Supreme Court to reduce the power of the current conservative majority. Some would also like to enact term limits for Supreme Court justices. The term limits proposal, and hit subscribe to this channel, get this segment viral. The term limits proposal doesn't worry Ginsburg because she sees it as unrealistic, given that the Constitution specifies life terms for federal judges, and because, as she puts it, our Constitution is powerfully hard to amend. So it's a lifetime appointment. You're not going to institute term limits. And the Supreme Court, it's not like politics is a part of choosing the Supreme Court justice. That's true. Of course it is. But it's not mired in never-ending, political controversy. What they tried to do to Kavanaugh, they could have done to any Democratic politician. Okay, there was no direct evidence of anything. But again, they don't... Look, when the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia or the Attorney General of New York or, an endless Bill Clinton... Joe Biden. Why didn't Joe Biden resign? They wanted Kavanaugh to resign. Why didn't Joe Biden resign? His accuser filed a police report. That never happened with Kavanaugh or Trump. So you have people they use words like credible, and these are credible allegations. Well, credible allegations were leveled against Biden and other Democrats. But anyway, you don't want the Supreme Court to become this political football. You lost, Democrats, because you cheated. And you purged 200,000 voters in New York. And now you're complaining about a Georgia voting law that simply addresses and reforms pandemic-related protocol. And God forbid, people have to prove through ID that they live in a certain address. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? So they use euphemisms like voter restrictions, but they don't use the integrity euphemism. But you don't want no discussion of integrity. You have 3 months instead of 6 months to obtain a mail-in. People who collect votes in the drop boxes. Read the actual law. They actually work for the state. So there's protocol in place. Instead of just saying work hours, it's 9 to 5. So they're specifying, they're actually making the legislation, they're defining certain terms, and they're ensuring that neither political party can take advantage of loopholes. The rebuttal that, it didn't happen in last year. There was nothing wrong that took place. Yeah, okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that you won't have Republicans or Democrats taking advantage of loopholes in the future. As it is, Stacey Abrams for months and months stated that she was the real governor, or that Brian Kemp didn't win in a fair manner. So when Democrats win the state of Georgia, they say, how dare you, how dare Trump have the audacity to claim that he didn't lose it. For months, Stacey Abrams was calling Brian Kemp an illegitimate governor, okay? That she was saying that she really won. So Democrats, the Democratic Party has no, moral compass. They don't live by principles that can be, that you can say exist independent of whatever situation, whether the political climate is good or bad for them, or whether their principles would actually come back to haunt them. So you would think that Stacey Abrams would congratulate Brian Kemp like they wanted Trump to do. No. She believed that Brian Kemp didn't really win. And you can look, she stated she was the true governor of Georgia. When Trump was speaking to Raffensperger and Kemp and going after Raffensperger and Kemp, Democrats, CNN, all of them said, how dare he do this? Oh my God. Now they're saying, how dare Republicans actually enact legislation? And by the way, Major League Baseball has no right to take any side, Because A, a court of law hasn't determined that this is unconstitutional, and B, if you're going to take a side with a voting law, why don't you did Major League Baseball have any thoughts or any vantage point on 200,000 votes being purged in New York specifically to harm Bernie Sanders supporters, or Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigning, or any of President Obama's failed foreign policy decisions in Libya and other places, or what's taking place right now at the border because of Biden's complete and utter mismanagement? This is a catastrophe taking place right under the nose of Democrats. They're the ones in power. They're the ones who pontificated. They're the ones who talked about cages. Well, guess what? Those facilities are overrun. But suddenly they're no longer termed in those. They're no longer viewed in those terms. But that's what Democrats do when it suits them. I mean, it's like the audacity, the arrogance is unbelievable. Like, well, we'll just add Supreme Court justices. Like, no, you lost. You lost a generation of Supreme Court justices. And you knew the stakes, and you would never, and you knew if you could pack the court, or that's not really packing the court, but if you could get 3 liberal justices under Clinton, if she were president, you would, John Oliver and Jimmy Kimmel and Fallon, all of them, they would mock and try to insult and denigrate any attempt by Republicans to pack the courts. They would say, oh my God, you see what they're doing? They're just packing, they're so childish, they're just packing more justices into the Supreme Court. I mean, you knew what was at stake, and you still cheated. Bernie Sanders. You knew what was at stake, and people didn't fall in line. So don't blame the people who didn't fall in line. You knew what was at stake, and you engaged in a primary that wasn't fair and neutral. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg was against this absurd idea. Stephen Breyer is against this absurd idea. You have 2 of the most iconic or well-respected or, RBJ and Breyer are 2 of the longest-serving liberal justices. And Breyer is against it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was against the idea. And now you have President Biden with a 36-panel commission. The Democrats always find the authority, it's always an appeal to an authority. So, and they do the same thing with the intelligence community. So when Hunter Biden's emails came out, it's a Russian plot, even though John Radcliffe, the director of national intelligence, stated no, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with Russia. It had nothing to do with Putin. Oh, yeah. And then the New York Post's account was suspended on Twitter for no reason. Then, of course, Dorsey apologizes several weeks back. Gosh, that was a mistake. Well, gee, that's nice. You just found out it was a mistake right now. What a coincidence. Also, like, voter ID, like, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? Secondly, with Georgia, getting back to Georgia, and if in Georgia and throughout the country, almost everywhere around the country, President Trump got a greater percentage of the non-white vote than he did in 2016. More Black and African American voters, Asian American voters, Latino voters, Hispanic American voters, more voters, more people of color voted for Trump in Georgia. So to try to paint the Georgia voting reforms as this, you're trying to restrict a certain group, the groups that Republicans were allegedly trying to restrict voted more in favor of Trump than they did in 2016. He did better. He got a greater percentage of the non-white vote than any Republican in 60 years, according to Newsweek. And then if you want to say, well, Bush got better, like, there's one journalist said, well, that's not true. Bush did better. It's like, well, okay, President Trump outperformed his 2016 numbers among people of color in Georgia. Okay, so we can go back and forth. The voting bill and packing the courts is like these obsessions by Democrats. You're talking about a political party that called Trump an illegitimate president for 4 years and said that he investigated him on the absurd notion that he worked with Putin to buy Facebook ads and influence people. And then They say that those claims aren't baseless because you had intelligence operatives or chiefs backing them, and they were only backing them with high to moderate confidence. They used a dossier purchased by Clinton, a third-party tech firm outsourced by the Democratic Party, paid for by the Democratic Party they used Company 1 in the indictments to indict 18 Russian intelligence officials. The whole thing was public relations. No American was indicted on working alongside any Russian intelligence official. That should tell you something. So, you're talking about complete hypocrites. The Republicans are hypocrites too on a lot of things. But you're talking about complete hypocrites that are propped up. I mean, does Jimmy Kimmel, is he a late night talk show host, or does he work for the Democratic Party? It's like, can you have an entertainment in our world today that isn't linked to spewing Democratic Party talking points? Is it possible to have entertainment anymore? Like, if you didn't have every facet of U.S. society propping up the Democratic Party, from the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, all of late night, all of Hollywood, the music industry, like, imagine if things were objective. Like, if media wasn't outraged always at every single thing Republicans do. Could you imagine? And Democrats, like, with all of those advantages, they have the thinnest the thinnest majority in Congress in decades. And then in 2022, when Republicans have the House, then what's going to happen to Democrats? Let's imagine also media becomes just a tiny bit more objective and actually reads the Georgia bill and actually looks at court packing for what it is, a narcissistic attempt at just completely rewriting the rules, even though if Clinton had won, there's no way on planet Earth or in the universe they would allow Republicans to pack the courts. So it's just like, it's unbelievable. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Thanks.